Hi.
Hi Abhinav, am I audible?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so here we are for our another episode of Authors Meet. I would like to start with a brief introduction about you. So what I read about you and what I understand is you are a social development professional. So
Consultant. Yeah. So
what
I'm in
that
a
means, if
consultancy
I ask
firm at
you?
the moment. So I am in a sustainability team. I've been a consultant for about 3 years. Professionally, I'm a consultant. Like I have a job there. So I've been working with various consultancies and all, so wherein I am advising various social firms, like NGOs, trust societies, and how to go about various corporate social responsibility practices and all. And then apart from that, I have my own NGO, wherein we are helping women find employment through self-help groups and hello.
Yeah, you're audible.
All right, sure. So yeah, so that is how I've been a social development professional. But yeah, professionally, I have a job, and personally, I have my own NGO which has been working in various fields. We've been educating women, employing them, educating poor children. So poetry is something which comes along with it.
All right. If I ask you, why did you choose to write prose as a form of literature and not any other, way?
I mean, like, you know what? So one can say that I've been very lazy that way because I do come from a family of writers. My mother is a writer. My nani, my grandmother, is a writer.
Mhm.
And then I've been writing for as long as I remember. I've always been fascinated by language, writing words, and everything else. And then it comes quite easily to me in the sense that, I like playing with words. Okay, this is a new word. And then while I'm talking with someone, while I'm writing, so when I look at something, the first impulse that I have is to write about it.
Mhm.
And so that way, and then once I start writing, I find it very fascinating how I can play around with the meanings, and then the words, how one sentence blends into another sentence. So that is something which I like doing. And
Mhm.
besides that, probably that is something which I can that is probably something which I can do, quite easily, as compared to other things. Probably if I could paint, I would have painted as well. But writing is something which is, I like doing it. Probably
Okay.
painting is something that I like doing it, but if I show someone what I have painted, people will be like, ye kya hai? What is this that you have done? Writing is something, people, probably it's more socially acceptable for people when they see what I do when I write.
Okay, so after I read your book, your collection of poems, I gather that you write about the unprivileged, about things that are not very spoken about. How
Right.
did you decide on the topic of your poems?
So yeah, as I was saying that I've been in the social field for quite a while, right? So I do spend a lot of time with the underprivileged, the poor people, and the women and everyone else. So I have had the experience of seeing it firsthand. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like I was mentioning that apart from personally, like my own NGO and looking at the pain of the people and a lot of other things, in my job itself. So I audit a lot of other firms, a lot of other institutions. I see what practices, social practices that they're doing. So before now, obviously now during pandemic that has reduced a lot. But before pandemic, I was spending a lot of time on the field. So when I look at something, I have this urge to, express it. I cannot keep it to myself. Usually I talk a lot with people, and find different ways of putting it out there, probably venting it. But then, and I've been doing it for like 10 odd years. I started writing when I was like 14 or 15, like proper writing, getting published in one magazine or another. So then I realized that, this is something which I should do more often. And during lockdown, I realized that, okay, I have this huge work that I should probably start putting it out. So that was probably the beginning of how it all started for me.
So it all started with pandemic.
No, the book was published during the pandemic. I had been writing for 10 odd years. It's just that, I mean, like, I know so many people who write, right? So it's not, I don't know anyone who doesn't express at all, whether it's painting, music, singing, writing, one thing or another. It's just that for me, it's writing. It's been writing for 10 odd years. During the pandemic, I got some time, when initially when things were going haywire, none of us knew what we have to do, and then we also had good amount of time in our hands. Like, for me, like, I had that window of 15-20 days when, my company was figuring out how to adapt to this new change, work from home and everything else. I had that sort of time, and then I began exploring. I'd been trying to find out how to publish my work, and then I began exploring more seriously, contacting publishers and all, and they started getting back to me, and one of them I chose, and then I self-published as well, and that was the time when I got published during the pandemic.
All right. So somehow pandemic gave you that excuse to publish your works.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, one, like I mentioned, I've been pretty lazy in that way that, I write a lot, but then it was only getting published whenever I would get some request. Someone would ask me, okay, this is nice, probably you should publish it. I'd be like, oh yeah, do you think so? I'll do it then. But then apart from that, there is a lot of, I'm not sure if everyone experiences it, but at least for me, there was this a sense of self cringe which is there. Okay,
Okay.
whenever you are writing something, whenever you do something, create something, song, writing, anything at all, you are like, I like it because I made it. This is sort of my creation. I'm proud of it. But what would other person think of it? Probably it's not as good as I think it is. And
Okay.
because what I write is not like something very complicated, something very fancy or anything at all. So when I look around, there are people writing, I don't know what sort of poetry, which is very nice. So I'm like, is it even worth it? So this pandemic gave me the excuse and also the opportunity for me to, take it more seriously, apart from what I usually do.
All right. So that was about the topic of the poems that you've chosen to write on. One of my
Right,
favorites that I read was about this teacher who was undervalued.
right,
So
right, right.
can you talk about that a little bit? How did
I mean,
you
like,
come about
yeah.
writing? Yeah.
Right. So the thing is, a lot of my poems are about metaphor. So if I am talking about a teacher in my one of my works, it doesn't actually have to be about a teacher. So that teacher is basically a person who is willing to put a lot of efforts. So it could be anyone. It could be our mother, it could be our parents, anyone at all who puts in a lot of effort but really doesn't get recognized for it. No one really realizes and values what they're doing for us. And now, again, the between the teacher and a child, a teacher and a student, this relationship is quite unique in the sense that, a lot of when we are young during school, our main priority is to have fun. Whereas
Yeah.
there is someone who, I mean, like, we want to just go out. Who wants to sit inside a classroom between four walls and just look at that blackboard? In fact, one of my other poems is about that as well. They stare at the wall and hear what I say. But I personally was a very distracted child. Like, I would constantly look around, look outside the window, probably find a rabbit in the cloud. I think we all were this way. Some of us learned to focus earlier than the rest. But once I was sitting and then I realized, this teacher, he has a job, just like I have my job. I have to go to a client and do something, get something done. This
Mhm.
poor chap, this poor person has a job to do, and then he has to manage what 20, 40 odd children, like, little, with so much energy. And to maintain that level of calm day in, day out, do it for years, every day. I mean, that is something which is commendable. So although I was talking about the concept in general, teacher was something which, I could personify. That sort of personification came very easily with a teacher. So that was the reason I chose this sort of setting for the that poem that I wrote.
All right. So, coming back to the big question, which most of us would want you to ask, uh, what does Sonder mean?
So Sonder, it is not an English word. It is not an English dictionary word. It was created in 2012 by John Koenig, which it comes from German and French as well. while in German, right, it means something special. All right. In French, it means to ponder, to probe into something. And so, English doesn't have a lot of words to explain a lot of things. So a lot of times, there is a whole field dedicated to this neologism that, people create words or bring in words from other languages. Usually it's Scandinavian or something like that. So this particular word basically means that, while you are there and you have this sudden realization, at times, very Arab sort of realization that, everyone around you has a story. Everyone, someone's going through something, someone is happy, someone just got a promotion, someone probably lost their job. A lot is happening, that way you are not special. You have their own level of struggle, but then so do the other people around you. And then I personally have this sort of realization, I don't know, for me it's some sort of a catharsis that, when I'm sitting at a railway station or airport, something, very busy sort of setting, which is not very common during pandemic. But then I've always been, fascinated with this feeling that, I look around and I'm like, someone's like departure terminal, or someone's coming down, or someone's leaving, arrival, someone's coming down, and someone's coming from somewhere, someone is coming for a meeting, someone's coming to meet family, someone's happy, someone's sad, leaving their family behind. So that feeling, that constant realization that, there's so many stories around you, and there is possibly no way you would probably know all of them, or even a few of them. So, and this is what I do. Most of my poems are about these abstract concepts, or about, people who have their own stories. Probably a teacher, a soldier who's coming back from a war, or probably even not being able to sleep in the night. You know, I
Yeah,
mean,
you've
like, if I'm not able to sleep, yeah, yeah, go on.
yeah, you've talked about insomnia a lot.
Yeah, yeah, because that is something which I've had for a very long time. I mean, fortunately, I don't have it anymore. Probably because, yeah, getting tired the whole day. But during my student days, during my college days, I used to have it a lot. And there were a lot of reasons for it. One, of course, was that I was doing so much. And then like I told you, I had too much energy at the time that I could not sleep. I had to do something or another at any point of time. And then I used to have a lot of coffee. I used to have a lot of coffee, like 12, 15 cups of coffee in a day. I still do, but I've reduced that. Yeah, so I used to have that. And then because I had to, in my college days, I was into a lot of extracurricular activities, like, a lot of stuff. So a lot of these poems were written in the, wee hours of the day, in the after midnight. So this, hello? Oh yeah, what you're
Yeah,
mentioning, yeah, what you're mentioning about insomnia, this was this was inevitable, but involuntary as well. I did not mean to for insomnia to come into this. And then a lot of times, I would meet people, talk with people, and they would also talk about their experience with insomnia. I'll ask them that, why, how do you sleep, when you have this sort of thing. So yeah, so this was probably the reason. Or probably just there, and there were those other reasons that, probably during college days, I'll have the exam the next day, and there'll be this huge army of mosquitoes. That was the time when I wrote this one. Would come and then that one time I'll be able to sleep, mosquitoes would come down, and then I'll not be able to sleep. So that used to be very annoying for me.
all right. So my next question is, what are the different literary elements that I've used while you were writing your poems?
All right, so that way, so I have not very critically assessed what I usually do. I prefer to leave it freestyle sort of thing, that whenever I'm writing, and then a few days, a few months later, at times I go back to it and I'm like, okay, this is something which might need rework or something like that. But yeah, about the tools, the literary tools that I utilize, I have realized that I use alliteration a lot,
Oh,
and personification does play a very, like I was just mentioning, personification does play a very big role in what I write. And similarly, some metaphor, in addition to that, metaphor is something which I use a lot, because as a person, I'm not a very talkative person.
mm-hmm.
as a, I like to say stay quiet, silent, observe, look around a lot. So when I am writing a poem, naturally it is coming from some of my own personal experience. But then I don't want to make it too biographical in nature that, then it may not be very relatable for the reader. Because
Right.
for me, Sonder is as much when the book Sonder is as much about me writing the book about as much it is about the person who's reading about it. And that is the reason I put small little brief introductions before each of those poems, because it is important that we are sort of on the same page, but it is a mutual sort of realization that when suppose when you're reading a poem, you're like, oh my god, I never thought of this way. A lot of people do say that. And then interestingly, a lot of people, if I, without that sort of brief intro to the poems, people tend to interpret it in a very different way. Someone might be thinking, there is one poem, Pluto, which is about a frog who is stuck at the end of a well, who is looking out, and then he's wondering, he doesn't want to go out. So although the basic motive remains the same, it is about ignorance. Someone will be like, oh, this is satire, you are trying to, this is sort of a political commentary. Someone would be like, oh no, this is something sort of about imagination stopping someone from being creative.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is a lot of alliteration and metaphor simile just comes and goes out of whatever I do.
Okay. So when did you personally start reading and, writing? Reading, if I talk about.
Yeah, so writing, yeah, I sort of told you about that. Reading, so I've always been an avid reader. Like I told you, I did not used to talk a lot in my childhood days. I used to sort of find solace, some sort of resort in the books that I would read. So I mean, like I've been reading since I was like 6 or 7. And I was a sort of chap who would sit in an English lecture and not read the curriculum book. I'll be reading something else. It used to be once upon a time, it used to be Ruskin Bond. Sometimes it used to be something else. Then it went on to Enid Blyton or something like Vikram Seth, and just went on and on. So I've been reading for a very long time. In fact, last few years that has reduced a bit. After working and everything else, after college got over, so I don't get time to read as much. I wish I did. But then yeah,
Still
so
find the struggle to find time to read, or do you still manage it?
I manage it, but I'm still not able to read as much as I used to once upon a time. I
Uh,
manage it, but I wish I could do more of it.
And what was the first book that made you cry, if I ask?
You know, uh, it's hard to say, but yeah, there was this sort of catharsis that I had that when I was reading Five People You Meet in Heaven.
All
Okay,
right, is one of my favorites.
yeah, and I've read all the rest. Even Tuesdays with Muri I've read because so I'll tell you why. So the one which resonated the most with me was Tuesdays with Muri because I've had my own once upon a time I had a spine issue. I know a lot of people have had very serious spine issues. So I realize, right, and this lumbar puncture thing is something which I know someone who has been through it. I mean, for them, it was a successful case. Nothing, there was no impact after it. And then I like, that is, again, that's which album is something which is something sonder for me, who imagine that professor going around, no one knows their story. And this author sits with them and then they start telling, and then you realize, oh my god, this person has such a long and interesting story to tell. And five people you meet, and I mean, it's something sort of a introspection for you. You go
Right.
around, and then I realize, what I have realized, a lot of us just lose sentiments on our way. It is not deliberate, but then imagine we are working 13, 14 hours in a day, and then obviously this is something before pandemic, and we don't get to spend that much time with our loved ones, our near ones, and then we sort of lose that sort of touch. And then this is something which is all even more true nowadays. They may leave us, and we may never know what they held for us. So, that sort of realization I had with that, and then that had a big impact on how I perceived people.
Mhm.
So, lot of other books, even Mitch Albom in general, all the other books that they've written, he's written, all of them have had a good impact on me, a
So
positive impact. There are other poems which
over
give
here
you.
has a question for you. She says that I've always thought poems are written in a burst of inspiration. So is it
Hmm.
true? So would you like to answer?
It is, it is in the sense that there is a seed for the poem. For poem, we're talking about poems right now, right? So there is always a seed. But for me, and the reason I use this sort of, you know, Kuliri is because you plant it somewhere and then you wait for it to germinate and for it to grow. So there
Okay.
is always a burst of creativity, and which I told you, like, that is the reason insomnia is such a central theme for me. But there have been times when that burst of poetry came to me, and I'm like, okay, I wrote 2 or 3 poems, and then what to do next? And then I went out for a walk, some park or something, observe people, looked around. I'm like, okay, this is something which can be done. So I work on it. So it is a burst, but then I have not been gifted that way. That in that burst of creativity, I write the whole thing. There have been times when I've written 7, 8 works in one go, and there have also been times when I have not written even a single one in 7, 8 days, or probably 2 or 3 months even. So that just happens.
Okay,
So
the next question that they ask is, do you have a schedule that you follow to sit down and write, or do you write like any other fiction writing process, or so I understand you don't follow that process.
because I wish I did. It's not like I am. I like routine. I like, okay, sitting for 2 hours and this time I'll write. But I don't know. For me, it doesn't work that way. I feel that I cannot force myself to write something or come out with something creative. I'm sure if I do, I'll be able to write. But then again, I don't think it'll be as good as it would be, which might come at 2 a.m. in the morning. I'm dozing off, probably have a dream, and then I'm like, okay, this is something, and I'll get up and start writing right there, because then I'll lose it the next day. So yeah, that way I actually don't, but that is not to say that no one should. I wish I did that, because life is quite uncertain. Sometimes you're not able to take out time at that particular sort of way.
It's all about when creativity hits you, I reckon.
It just hits you like that. So yeah.
You have one more question. What are you working on next? If you would like to disclose it here.
Oh, no, there's nothing. I'd be more than happy to talk about it. So, when I was writing Sonder, and as I told you, it is as the book is as much as about writing as it is about the person who's reading. So I realized, when I am writing something, why not integrate the whole process into the writing process itself? So then the next work that I'm talking about, it is an anthology wherein I am inviting other authors to work with me, co-authors. So this again would be something like Sonder, but this is called Meraki. Okay, Meraki is now this is a Greek word. It basically means, it actually comes from Turkish. Greeks took it and now they use it. It is more of um, it's more of a colloquial word that not able to think of any word in our like in Hindi or something like that, but something like when a lot of people are, when they come together and they create something and they express something and they vent what the urge that they have inside them. So now that is the next thing that I have been working on. It is still in a very nascent stage. It hasn't come out much. I have my ideas ready, but I'm still looking around for people who can work with me on this.
So, do you plan to write poetry itself, or do you plan to take up any other form of literature as well?
So I have started writing short stories.
Okay.
So those short stories, and the two reasons why I wrote poetry and why I'm writing short stories and not longer than that. One is that I'm pretty impatient that way, that if I have some idea in mind, I have to put it out there in a very short period of time. And
Before you
then
think of, yeah,
sorry,
before you lose it or you lose a hold of
before I
it.
lose it, right? Before I lose it, and then secondly, if I am writing something, I like to leave the person, the reader with something. And then I feel that, if it is something too long, maybe something like a novel, then okay, that is very nice, that you create a whole world um, around yourself and then you immerse in it. But then this short form of expression, I find that, you you can hit someone the way you were hit by it. You were sitting in a park and then suddenly you were hit by that feeling. So I want to do that with the reader as well. So I've been trying short stories as well, but I've hardly written any, like, probably a dozen or something. So let's see, probably sometime in the medium term, I'll be doing that. But immediately, I'm still committed to poetry and prose and things like those.
Okay. So yeah, as you mentioned, you want your reader or the audience for that matter to be hit by that uncertain thought that they might have not come across. But while you
Right.
were writing your poems and while I've read it in your books, I found that you've made a mention about it in a very short paragraph before beginning the poem to make sure that the reader as well as the author, they're there on the same page. So
Right.
I found that very creative. How did that idea struck?
That idea, so when I was writing it, and so now the thing is, I've been writing for a decade now. So I've shown some of them. I've been very secretive with the whatever I've written, and that most of the reason has been self-cringe. I'm like, हंसेंगे लोग, people might find it funny, but then I'm like, अब तो करना ही है. So now the thing is, the reason it is there is not to dictate what to make out of the poem. I want the person to interpret it in as and how they want it, as and how they want it to do, how want to go ahead with it. But the reason it is still there is to sort of give people a flavor, because suddenly I'm talking about a frog in a well, and people are like, what just happened? And then the next poem is talking about war and soldier and bloodshed. So, there is something sort of a tone to connect one to the next. And then, so all of these poems which I have written, which are there in the book itself, they were not written at the same time. Some of them were written 7 years ago. Some of them were written like, probably last year or something. So there has to be some bridge to connect them together. Even for me, I'm not sure if that happened with the reader or someone who was reading who would realize this. But for me, I have followed some sort of an order, a chronological order in the poems. They start very easy with someone who's returning to hostel and wondering the gate band ho gaya hoga, something like that, to the one which talks about a lot of bloodshed and the price of war and people losing their homes and shelter. So there is something like setting the tone above it. And and another thing is, I want the works to be relatable, like I mentioned. I don't want someone to be thinking that, okay, this is something, okay, nice, very nice, and just go on. So that sense of paisa vasool ought to be there for them. That, okay, they get the whole gist of it right before they start reading, and I'm like, oh, now I get what they are saying. Although, a lot of people have told me, there was no need for this. This looks like a school textbook that, CBSE mein those used to be there. Pablo Neruda ke pehle, yeah, for cardboard, this cardboard is something. That is the reason not explained too much, but given a certain tone to it. That, okay, people know what is coming next for them. Then probably they can get hit by it.
Also, that I think that made sure that the poems can be, it may not be read in a go. You can read it in sections. You can take
Right.
the poem, you can have the background, and then you can follow the flow of it.
Right, right, right. So that is the reason there are three sections in the book itself. And at
Yeah.
the beginning of each section, there is a quote by someone, some quote that I personally have been very influenced by and feel that it might help someone else as well. Because then, yeah, it is more of a journey that, going me and the reader going around together and that way. So it has to be smooth. I don't want it to be very sudden for them. It has to be abrupt but not sudden. I'm not sure if I'm making sense right now, but yeah, that is how I want it to be.
Okay, so when I understand you published your book in this pandemic, so that was your first hand experience with publishing. So, can you talk about any unethical practice that is there in the publishing industry as of now?
I mean, like, I want to get published. I don't want to offend anyone. But then, yeah, I mean, like, jokes apart, there are a lot of promises which publishers make, especially the small time ones. A lot of the publishers which leverage the fact that people, the authors, are very keen, at times even desperate to get published. So they are
Right.
willing to accept any term and condition to get published, as long as, the work is out there. So, like I told you, 15, 20 days I had in that window, I approached a lot of publishers and I realized that, what they're doing, what they're saying, they'll not actually do it. When I probed on and on and I kept asking questions, "Nee, how would this happen? How would that happen?" So they might say that, distribution would happen here and there and whatnot, and but they don't actually mean it.